Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jed and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Sap, we are finally starting to see some of the fallout from the NBA trade deadline happen, especially James Harden's impact on the Philadelphia 76ers. And so far, 2 games, the results are pretty damn good. Both wins at Minnesota and at New York. So not like they've played the best teams in the world, though. Minnesota, not too bad this year. Harden in those 2 games. First game, 27 points, 12 assists, 8 rebounds, 8 of 9 from the free throw line. Second game, 29 points, 16 assists, 5 steals, 10 rebounds, was 10 of 10 from the free throw line. And Joel Embiid shot a million free throws in that game, too. So the early returns look pretty good. What have you seen so far?
Yeah, they've been great. And again, it's only been 2 games, and it's only going to be for, another 6 weeks before we get to the postseason, and then we'll see what happens going forward. But for the immediate future, it looks really good for the 76ers. I think this is probably the best 1-2 tandem in the NBA. Now, I would normally think that LeBron and Anthony Davis can be as good, if not better, but Anthony Davis is just not reliable at this point. So I would say as a 1-2 punch, I would take Harden and Embiid as the top one in the NBA. I mean, Durant, he's got Kyrie and Ben Simmons, neither as good as James Harden. You can go through all the list. Giannis is, I think, the best player in the league, but, Middleton and, any other player on that team, just not as good, obviously, as James Harden. I was very high on this trade for Philadelphia because, me as a contrarian, Jet, like I was never a huge Harden guy, but now people are attacking him so much. I'm becoming a Harden guy. And I've said this to you before. I can only think of 6 or 7 guys I've ever seen in the history of basketball who are elite scorers and elite facilitators. And James Harden's one of them. I think LeBron James is one. Isaiah Thomas could be that guy when he was with Detroit. Larry Bird had that ability playing for the Celtics. Oscar Robertson. I think Luka Doncic eventually can be that guy, but there's not many. And I don't want to hear Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant. They were phenomenal scorers, but not great facilitators. Harden is elite at both of those tasks. And I think he's found the right place to really grow as a player with Joel Embiid. And it's going to work well together. You were talking about the free throws. Jet, in the first 2 games, Embiid 34-40 from the free throw line. Harden 18 of 19 from the free throw line. That's 52 of 59 from the free throw line. In 2 games, that's 88%. I mean, that's unheard of. I mean, that's incredible.
And I hope that it's not something that you see in the postseason, because this is the part that drives everybody crazy about James Harden's game. Is he just lives at the free throw line and baits the officials, and it's gone down this year because the officiating has changed, which was a great decision by the league office because it's made the game much more watchable. But no one wants to watch a free throw game, a free throw contest in the playoffs. So. Do you think that it's something that you can see this carrying over into the postseason, or is this just going to be what we see sort of the regular season for the last 6 weeks of the Sixers?
Yeah, the officials tend to swallow the whistles a little bit in the postseason, and this was an issue with Karl Malone, who won 2 league MVPs, but was never quite the same player in the postseason. He lived at the free throw line in the regular season. Well, he didn't get those calls in the postseason. And that made him a less impactful player in the postseason than he was in the regular season. That's been the case with James Harden and to a lesser degree, Joel Embiid. The other concern I would have with Embiid and Harden is neither has really shined in the postseason as compared to the regular season. It's not like they've been awful in the postseason, but they don't elevate in the postseason, partly because they don't get to go to the free throw line as much, partly because of their conditioning or lack thereof. They don't have a lot in the tank when you get to the postseason, whereas the really, truly great players like LeBron James, who once he gets to the postseason, plays even better because he's one of the best conditioned athletes we've ever seen in the NBA. Right. I don't even have to bring up Michael Jordan, what he was like in the postseason, or Kobe Bryant, all of those great players. Embiid and Harden have a tendency of petering out a little in the postseason because of their lack of conditioning. Now, that's going to be up to Doc Rivers to try to manage minutes the last 6 weeks of the season. The problem is Philadelphia is not very deep unless they add some talent in the buyout market. They're not a very deep
That's what they gave up, especially to get Harden, was they gave up the rest of their depth.
Exactly.
So,
yep.
I mean, they're going to have to log major minutes.
One. Yeah, you gave up 3 players for one, right? You gave up Simmons, who's yet to play for Brooklyn, and Lord knows when he's going to show up. But you also gave up Drummond, who was a quality backup center, and Seth Curry, who's a dynamite 3-point shooter. So you did give up quality and quantity to get Harden, who was the best player in the deal without question. So, yeah, they're not a very good team. Their starting lineup and their closing lineup of Harden, Tybal, Maxey, Tobias Harris, and, of course, Embiid, that's as good as there is in the NBA. The one player who's going to have to really adjust, though, is Tobias Harris. He's now the fourth option. He's going to have to live with that because, obviously, Embiid and Harden are 1-2, and then you make a case that Tyrese Maxey is now number 3.
Yeah, I think he is. I think he's proven to do that. And Harris is a nice player. He's extremely overpaid and inconsistent with his scoring. So, yeah, I think that Maxey is their preferred third option there. But, yeah, early returns look really, really good. The thing that I think is being talked about today, which I tweeted about yesterday, Sap, before we finished up with the James Harden talk, is he comically, I don't know if he was trolling or what, described himself as, quote, one of the best teammates the NBA has ever seen. Is he trolling, Sap, or is he delusional?
Probably trolling a little bit. I mean, you have to look back, right? So when he was in Oklahoma City, he was used as a sixth man, and then he got traded to Houston, and that's where his career really just blossomed. Well, he had problems with Dwight Howard. Later, he had problems with Chris Paul. Then he had problems with Russell Westbrook, who was a close friend of his. He goes to Brooklyn, where he's supposed to have a good relationship with Kevin Durant, and I'm not sure what happened there. I don't know if he really had a relationship with Kyrie Irving. That's never seemed to jive, really. So I don't know where James Harden comes across as being one of the best teammates ever. I think he's a sensational player. I mean, the numbers are shattering. But as a teammate, no, I wouldn't go there. Maybe he's just trying to pump himself up. And maybe this works with Embiid. Embiid's kind of a tough fit as well, because there's going to be a game where Harden dominates the ball and goes, 7 for 24, has 7 turnovers, and Embiid's going to be pissed. And Embiid will say something after the game. I mean, he has no filter, right? I mean, he criticized Ben Simmons. I think he'll be ready to criticize James Harden, although it's only 6 weeks of the regular season. Then we see what happens in the postseason. So the honeymoon period should be short. But back to your original question, no, I don't think James Harden's one of the best teammates in NBA history. I think he's a fabulous player who maybe is in the best spot now because it's Embiid's team, and Embiid seems to be okay with that.
Yeah, I think sometimes players get confused with the fact if they have a lot of assists, that means that they're a good teammate for some reason. And he had the thing a couple of years ago, too, where he was talking when him and Giannis were in competition for the MVP award. He's like, well, if I could just run it and dunk it every single time, I'd be, MVP every year, too. Like, I don't know that he has like a great sense of himself or other people, but yeah, he's a fabulous player. He's just he's a interesting guy. He's not Kyrie Irving miserable, but he's not one of my favorite guys in the NBA.
No, he's a little bit odd, and that team in Brooklyn that when it was put together, when you added Harden to Durant and Kyrie Irving, if they had ever played together, could have been spectacular because I think their styles would fit on the court, but off the court, maybe not so much. But I will say this, he looks good in a 76ers uniform. It seems to fit him.
Sap, nobody who's a good teammate has torpedoed 2 teams in a calendar year. I mean, he did that in a year. He managed to get himself traded from 2 teams because he wanted to get traded from 2 different teams.
Yep, absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. The Eastern Conference is fascinating this year because just every team that's in the race right now, has some flaws that could lead to a first-round exit, but they may be good enough to make it to the finals. Someone's going to the finals to represent the Eastern Conference, and it really looks like there's 6 or 7 true contenders.
Yeah, undoubtedly. And Sap, what I've been saying more recently in talking about the Celtics when I've been doing the post-game shows for the Celtics, which has been a lot of winning lately. I've changed my prediction from definite first-round exit to they can win a round. It's going to depend on the opponent. And I've talked a lot about this season, Sap, and I think you've talked about it too. We talked about it on the show. That seeding has become a little bit less important to the degree that home court advantage, I don't think matters as much as it used to. But in terms of the East this year, because it's so tight and because the Celtics, I'm just using them as an example, haven't really shown that they have, that they've shown they're sort of Jekyll and Hyde. You don't know what team might show up, especially in the postseason. Seeding is going to be of the utmost importance for them, of the utmost importance, I should say, for them, because they could easily lose to a bunch of teams in the East, but they could also beat several teams in the East. So as far as it stands right now, the Celtics are the 6th seed in the East. The Sixers, who we were just talking about, are the 3 seed in the East. The Celtics would lose that series if that were
I
to
agree.
take place.
Yeah, because Embiid would be nearly impossible to deal with. And look, Robert Williams III and Al Horford are really good, but he's a nightmare matchup for pretty much any team.
But at the same time, if they were to drop down to the 7th seed, where the Raptors are right now, they're a game and a half ahead of them. That would be the playing the Chicago Bulls. I think the Celtics could win that series. So the East is really jumbled, Sap. Right now, as it stands, the Heat are in first place. Then the Bulls, Sixers, Bucks, Cavs, and Celtics. Those are the teams above the. I don't know what line you want to call it, the safe line, the non-play-in line. 1 through 6.
Yeah,
and then
you're in the playoffs, because then the play-in is 7 through 10, which Brooklyn is 8th right now, which means they'd have to come in through the play-in. And just think about that. If Brooklyn has to come in through the play-in tournament, end up being the 7 or 8 seed, they would play the 1st or 2nd seed. And if it's Durant healthy, Kyrie Irving able to play both home and away, and Ben Simmons engaged, who the hell wants to play them as a 7 or 8 seed?
Right. I don't even necessarily think, the Ben Simmons factor is definitely interesting. But I think that with just a fully able to play Kyrie, and we're going to talk about that in a second, and Kevin Durant, they could still have the capability of beating virtually anybody in the East. And this sort of has to do with the parity of the East, in that it's not like one team stands out as, holy crap, no one's taking this team down, a la, the Warriors, a couple of years ago in the West. And when it was LeBron James and the LeBron James Invitational for, over a decade in the Eastern Conference. But yeah, 7, 8, 9, and 10 are Toronto, Brooklyn, Charlotte, and Atlanta. And as far as those teams that are all really jumbled together, Sap, from 7 to 1, the Raptors 6.5 games back, the Celtics 5, the Cavs are the 5th seed 4.5, Milwaukee 4, Philadelphia 3 games back, Chicago 2 games back, and as I said, Miami at 41 and 21 is in the lead. So it could definitely change with about 6 weeks to go. And I don't think the standings will hold. It seems very likely that we'll see a major sort of shuffling. But seeding's gonna be all important to some teams, and other teams, I don't think it matters as much. If Brooklyn is healthy and Kyrie is able to play, I don't think they give a damn where they're seated.
Or where they play, right? Because they're a better road team than a home team. And if Kyrie's only able to play the road games, then they're better off not being the higher seeded team, because then they would play more games on the road and in theory have Kyrie Irving. And then the Ben Simmons question mark will be out there the rest of the regular season, see how he engages, if he's healthy mentally or physically, if he, fits in with Durant and Kyrie, which I think he will. Yeah, I mean, you could see a situation, Jet, where Brooklyn's the 8th seed and they're playing Miami in the first round, and Brooklyn would be the favorite in that series.
Yes.
Without question. If, as much as Miami has been a great story this year, and really not a big surprise to me, I before the season started, we gave our picks, and I thought it would be Milwaukee over Miami in the Eastern Conference. Now, this is before Harden went from Brooklyn to Philadelphia, and before Chicago, looked a lot better than I thought they were going to be, although I thought they would be a 4 or 5 seed. Now they're in contention for the top seed. Milwaukee's kind of taken it a little bit easy, which is understandable. They're the defending champs. They ended up playing into July last year, and then, Middleton and Holiday got on a plane, went to Japan and played in the Olympics. So those guys obviously had very minimal off season. Giannis, of course, was brilliant in the postseason. So I think they'll find their sea legs as you get closer to the postseason. They also don't have Brook Lopez, who hasn't played this year. So, they're kind of there laying in the weeds as the defending champs. The Celtics, look, they're 20-8 since January 1st. They have the best record in the Eastern Conference. They play lockdown defense. The problem is they're not very deep either. And, we'll see how long Jaylen Brown's out. If he's out for a game or two, no big deal. But, they do have some guys on that team that aren't very durable, including Jaylen Brown, who misses a lot of games, as does Marcus Smart, as does Robert Williams III. You need those 3 guys healthy because you're not very deep. But, they could cause some issues as well because they do play legitimate defense.
Yeah, absolutely. They're one of, if not the best defensive team in the NBA, and that certainly comes into play in the postseason is how good your defense is. But the problem with that is with a playoff series comes adjustments, and you can play, tremendous defense, but
Mhm.
teams are going to be able to adjust after,
Right.
seeing what you're throwing at them after a game or two. And so it might not be able to hold over a 7-game series that you're able to, do the same things defensively and disrupt what a team wants to do offensively. So I think it's all going to be for the Celtics. It's all going to be who the opponent they face in the first round. I think people are looking at the East right now and would say like, okay, a team like Chicago, they have had virtually no postseason success in a while. They're ripe for the picking despite a very good record. Cleveland is playing a little bit over their head. They're not quite, ready to be that primetime team yet. They're certainly ripe for the picking. So I think those are the teams that are seeded relatively highly right now that you would want to play that would be advantageous. And obviously, there has to be 2 play-in teams.
Mhm.
Like you said, nobody's going to want to play Brooklyn. And whether it's Toronto, Charlotte, or Atlanta, or I guess the Wizards could somehow sneak in there. Any of those teams is a team you'd also want to play in the first round. So the amount of time left is going to really determine who gets out of the first round and who doesn't.
Yeah, and the health of teams, obviously, especially Brooklyn. Want to see when Durant comes back. I'm sure when he comes back, he'll be just fine. He could like roll out of bed, miss a year, and still be the best scorer in the league. Kyrie is a wonderful talent. I know you can't stand him, but obviously we know he's a primetime player. And Simmons to me is the big X factor because if he is what he should be, they are going to be very difficult to beat because he brings that defense, rebounding, and playmaking. 3 things that then Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant don't have to worry about as much. He can kind of fill in the gap. He could truly be their Draymond Green, right? You could see Kyrie be kind of like Steph Curry, although Curry's more reliable. Durant be Durant, and then Ben Simmons be maybe even a bigger, more athletic version of Draymond Green. The thing is, Brooklyn doesn't have a Klay Thompson, although with Seth Curry and Patty Mills, they have some elite shooters, so they can have that same vibe that the Warriors had. It's going to be fascinating, Jet, the final 6 weeks of the regular season and then the postseason. It's just wide open, which is great to see. Like you said, for years, it was the LeBron James Invitational in the Eastern Conference. Normally, the first round matchups are like 4 or 5 game series. You might see 3 of the first 4 first round series go 7 games, which is completely different than we've ever seen.
Absolutely. It should be really, really fun. And you get some fresh blood in there too. Like I said, like Chicago, like Cleveland,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe we get Charlotte in there as well. So yeah, you're going to see some teams that you haven't really seen all that much of. As far as the Nets go, Sap, when you're talking about them, still uncertain what Kyrie Irving's status is going to be come postseason time, but things are changing, around the world and in the country as far as COVID goes. And that applies to New York City, where they are rolling back some of their vaccine mandates. However, they are not quite ready to pull the trigger on the mandate that says, if you have an unvaccinated employee, they can show up to their place of work. And that's technically the case, although strange. That Barclays is the place of work for Kyrie Irving. He is an employee of the Brooklyn Nets, so he can't play in their home games. That may be rolled back by the time the postseason starts. We don't know. The mayor of New York had a press conference, specifically was talking about Kyrie Irving in it and saying, he wants the Nets to win a championship. He feels bad. He doesn't think the rule's fair, but he also doesn't want to send the wrong message to other, people, other employees, other employers. And he certainly doesn't want a new spike in COVID cases. And so he's unwilling to change that right now. Sap, obviously, it's impossible to read the tea leaves and say, okay, definitively, yes, Kyrie Irving's going to be able to play in home games this season or this postseason. But in terms of this whole situation, doesn't it always just go back to the question of why can't he just get vaccinated and then we don't have to talk about this anymore?
Yeah, normally I would go along with that, but I think now it's becoming a bit ridiculous. And look, here I am going to defend Kyrie Irving in this situation.
Yeah, don't do that.
But here's the thing. He could sit on the bench, wear a mask, and attend the game, but he can't play in it, right? And if another team comes into Barclays and has an unvaccinated player, that player can play Like, does that make any sense? Any logical sense to anyone? I know it doesn't to me, and maybe I'm not the brightest guy in the world, but that makes no sense. And that's where I think at some point, Kyrie Irving being the boy who cried wolf, if he's complaining about that, people are going to say, well, it's just Kyrie. But just think about that. I had a deli that I opened up about 20 odd years ago, Jet, and we could sell groceries, produce, deli. So I could sell you a half a pound of ham, a half a pound of cheese, a half a pound of roast beef, but I couldn't make you a sub because of the way the store was zoned. That made no sense to me then, and this makes no sense to me now. I don't understand this at all, and I get everybody hates Kyrie Irving. He's the poster boy for all of this, and I know the mayor, Eric Adams, who I like, and he sounded like a human being, didn't he? He was like, I want to see them win the title, but I'm still the mayor of this city. I like that vibe. He doesn't sound like some guy that's detached.
Well, as far as New York mayor, I mean, the bar was low based off of their last one, de Blasio, who everybody hated. And, their long time ago, former mayor Giuliani is, the biggest pariah in the country, arguably. Right. So, nowhere to go but up as far as New York mayor goes.
Very true. Yeah, we had some toxic, polarizing mayors in the Big Apple. But, yeah, I mean, and again, if he can sit on the bench wearing a mask, but he can't play, but, if I'm a player from a visiting team who's not vaccinated, but I can play. Like it does now. Here's the thing: can he play at Madison Square Garden?
No,
because now he's not an employee of the Knicks, but he's
an
employee of the Nets. Like I don't know.
Sorry. With the new mandate things, actually, I think he can. I think you're right.
How ridiculous is that? Yeah. So I mean, how ridiculous? I mean, in terms of being illogical, this takes the cake.
All right. So this is making me sick.
You
to say
you hate him. I know you hate him. I get it, but suspend that. Say it's just some other guy. Say it's Patty Mills or someone else, and he has to sit on the bench and can't
play. I
agree
agree that it's illogical at this point. Mm-hmm. I do. I can't. I don't think you can objectively look at it and say it makes sense. But here's the problem I have with it: throwing out the fact that he burned the Boston Celtics to the ground for a long time, and I don't like the guy, and I've been very open about that. I don't like him. It's to me still, if he's able to play and they're able to win the championship, I feel like it sends such a bad message to be like, the guy can throw a temper tantrum and do what he wants and send the wrong message and advocate for not getting vaccinated, which not we all, but you and I and most, I think, sane and logical people agree is the most humanitarian thing to do and helpful for other people, and he's actively advocated against that and hasn't done it and been selfish. And if they are to go ahead and completely repeal this and he plays great in the postseason, something he hasn't always done, by the way, and they win a title and he's up there celebrating, saying I knew I was going to be vindicated all along, that's just a really bad look, not just for the league, not just for but for society in general. It's like, okay, these guys can get their way. And believe me, the people on the far right or the people who are even, the other crazy people on the far left who don't want to get vaccinated either, they're going to champion this guy and celebrate his title like, it's the biggest accomplishment that somebody's ever had. It's going to be like, if like Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier to them, like, this guy was shunned and look what he overcame. So that's taking aside the thing that,
but if they've changed the mandate, right, and taken the mandate off, then he kind of should be able to play. Like they're not giving him.
But then he just waited out. He was being a jackass, and he waited it out, and he's gonna eventually. Right. Him being able to play in the postseason and win a championship is a reward in of itself, Sap. So the messaging to me is just terrible. And yes, the rule is illogical. I can't disagree with that because it just is. I'm trying to be as objective as possible here. It is, but I feel like maybe this is me being completely crazy, Sap. But I feel like the NBA should say, you didn't follow the rule this season. This is what we had in place. This is what the city had in place. You're ineligible to play for the postseason. Next season, okay, great. They're not going to do that. There's 0% chance of that happening, but that's what I wish would happen.
But we've also heard fewer and fewer cases of COVID, right? So and this happened in the NFL where COVID just went away in the postseason. Like I was always ready, expecting like a star player to miss the AFC or the NFC championship game or the Super Bowl. And it just kind of went away. It just went away. And I think it's kind of gone away in the NBA. I mean, occasionally you hear of a player or a coach. I think Steve Nash is in the protocol right now, but for the most part, it's kind of gone away. It just from a logical standpoint that he can sit on a bench, wear a mask, but not play at Barclays Center because he's an employee of the Nets, but he could play at Madison Square Garden because that's the home of the Knicks. I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense. But again, this is Kyrie, and you know what? Kyrie's eating this up because we're all talking about him. And the mayor mentioned him, which is just glorious for Kyrie Irving. But again,
well, what do you think, Sepp, of what I'm saying about the messaging? Do you agree that if they were to win the title, which if he's able to play every game and they get right, even again, I still think without Ben Simmons, obviously he would help them tremendously. Even without Ben Simmons, I think that a fully available Kyrie and a fully available Kevin Durant is good enough based on the current NBA landscape to win a championship.
He never finishes the postseason anyway. He's been hurt like 4 out of 6 postseasons where he doesn't even finish. He didn't last year. You know, he didn't with Cleveland once. He didn't with the Celtics once. I mean, he's not not a reliable guy physically or mentally. So chances are he's going to do something stupid or twist an ankle or whatever. I don't hope that happens as much as I know you can't stand him. I love watching the guy play. I think he's a joy to watch as a talent. Like if we're going to talk about Ja Morant, who's a different type of dude than Kyrie Irving, to say the least. But, I still like watching the guy play. I think he's an incredible talent. But yeah, no, I can see what you're saying that, he just waited it out and got his way. Here's the rich guy who, thinks he's smarter than everybody. And in the end could say, see, I won. And then again, you can look at it one way because he hasn't played all that much this year. And now that Durant's been out a month and a half and that Simmons hasn't played yet, maybe those 3 guys have so much in the tank when you get to the postseason. Talk about load management in all different fashions, right? That the Nets could be on board.
20 games.
He's missed. That's why when people throw out, and I'm going to go off on a tangent here, and they go, Kevin Durant's the best player on the planet, which let's not call it the planet, just call him the best player in the NBA. But he's not. He's not the best player in the NBA. Giannis is the best player in the NBA because over the last 3 years, Giannis has played like 120 more games. That means something. And Giannis is better at the defensive end. And I'm a LeBron guy, right? And I'm already there, ready, willing, and able, and being as nice as I can. And I do love Giannis because who doesn't? He's the best player in the world right now, not the planet, the world. But Giannis is that guy, not Durant. Don't tell me Durant's the best player. He doesn't play enough. That's a big factor. But again, because he's going to have a lot of rest and Kyrie's going to have a lot of rest and Simmons is taking the year off and maybe shows up in 2 weeks, these 3 guys could roll into the postseason and have so much more left in the tank compared to, Embiid, who's played a lot of games this year and deserves the MVP. Give him credit for, fighting through or whatever the case may be. Yeah, that's not right either. And that's an issue that I think the league's going to have to address at some point. Now, if a guy's hurt, obviously, or injured, then he's going to be out. But, Kyrie's playing just the road games and Ben Simmons is talking about some sort of mental problem, which I don't know. Now he's got a back issue and Durant's always hurt. So those are issues that the league has to deal with because it leaves the regular season not important. And that's unfortunate, because
exactly. And if the Sixers or the Nets win, 2 very possible and probable finalists, the NBA, it's not going to look good for them because you're going to have one of 2 guys, Harden or, well, I guess Simmons could play 3. So 3 guys, Harden, Simmons, or Kyrie, who basically look like, they're not the most popular guys in the world. And no, for some reason, Kyrie still remains incredibly popular. I have no idea why. That's another.
To watch. He's incredibly great.
But even Adam Silver himself said that the Simmons Harden saga, not good for the league. Of
course not.
He wasn't shy about that, and he said it. So if Harden, is hoisting a championship trophy in Philadelphia and then heading into a strip club afterwards, it doesn't look good. It looks like another spoiled guy got his way. And, I'm not somebody who likes to call athletes rich and spoiled because I think that lets the billionaire owners off the hook and stuff. But it's just there's situations that are going on in the NBA right now that could break one way where, okay, it's really good for the league or another way where it looks really bad for the league.
And I know we're going to talk about that in a podcast later in the week about what the league needs to do to make sure that it continues to flourish as the collective bargaining agreement ends in a couple of years. But yeah, I see your point here. So, obviously you're going to root for the Celtics. I'm still rooting for the Lakers. They may not even make the play-in tournament the way they're playing. But, in the end, you kind of look at maybe Phoenix or Milwaukee, the teams that met last year who have come back and are engaged again. And you look at a player like Giannis, who plays every game that he can, and Booker, who's out there every night, and Chris Paul, who got hurt, legitimate injury, but will be back for the postseason. And you kind of see why people root for teams like that rather than Harden and Simmons and Kyrie, who just, almost manipulate the system to the point where it's a turnoff.
Yeah. I 100% agree. So let's wrap it up by talking about something that actually makes me happy instead of Kyrie Irving. And that is he's quickly becoming one of the most popular players in the NBA, maybe one of the most popular athletes in the country. Ja Morant has been a revelation this season. Every single game he posts just ridiculous highlights. And the Grizzlies continue to win. In fact, they have the third best record in the NBA right now, Sap. 43-20, just half a game behind the Golden State Warriors, which is also remarkable in and of itself. And Ja Morant is averaging 27.5 points a game, 6 rebounds, and 6.5 assists. He just put up a new Grizzlies franchise high, 52 points in their win against the San Antonio Spurs on Monday. He's a blast to watch. There's nothing that you can say about his game or his personality that is anything other than spectacular.
Sensational, right? He's kind of like the anti-Kyrie Irving. I don't want to call him the anti-Jason Tatum, but I mean, Kyrie Irving and Jason Tatum are guys that went to Duke, right? They were the number one high school recruits. They went to Duke. Kyrie was the first pick in the draft.
Ja Morant was a higher pick than Jason Tatum.
He was, but he played 2 years at Murray State compared to Duke. And he was a late bloomer. Yeah, pretty similar, right? I mean, remember that tournament he had in 2019. And I'm not disparaging Jason Tatum because I continue to see his game grow. But Morant is a little bit different. He plays with such an edge, like some anger to him, that he seems like a throwback player. Now, Tim Legler, who I like a lot on ESPN, I think he's one of the best analysts in the business. They don't use him enough, by the way. He compared Morant a little bit to Russell Westbrook in terms of the athleticism. He's not quite as strong as Westbrook. Westbrook's about 200 pounds. Ja's about 175. Now, he may fill out and get, bigger and stronger. He's still very young. A little bit of Kyrie, the way he finishes at the rim, and a little bit of the athleticism of Derrick Rose as well. Now, Kyrie's a better outside shooter than those other two players. Ja's not quite there. He's shooting 34% from three. If he continues to get a little better from three, look out, because going to the basket, I'm going to compare him to someone who I've only compared to a player once. And that's Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan. I've only now again. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic here.
That's good. You sound like you're on an ESPN show now or a Fox show. Like you're
right.
Really
where I'm going to say something crazy. Okay, so the only player I've ever compared to Jordan is Kobe in terms of style and all of that. I mean, LeBron and Jordan is not a good comparison. They're completely different players. Like LeBron is more magic than he is Jordan. I mean, there's no question about that. He's built like Karl Malone, and he's as fast as Allen Iverson, and he passes like magic, and I think he's the greatest player ever. But Jordan, the only player I ever compared to Jordan was Kobe, and I always say that Kobe was like 92% as good as Jordan, which is an incredible compliment, right? Ja's got a lot of that in him in terms of the way he attacks the basket. Now you didn't see Jordan early in his career. Now, in '86, when he came to the Garden for that playoff series, he put up 49 in game one, 63 in game two. Jordan was a different player than he was later in his career, even a few years after that. Jordan was kind of built like Ja Morant, except taller, about 6'6", 185,
That's
190.
Ja Morant's 6'3", 175, give or take.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he's lean. Jordan was the same way. I mean, Jordan filled out later, like most athletes do. He got stronger, was able to score in the low post, needed to do that, needed to get stronger because he was getting hammered by the Pistons and every other team. Ja's playing in a different time where he's not getting hammered going to the basket, but he needs to still get a little bigger and stronger. But his explosion to the basket, the ferocity with which he plays, reminds me of a mini Jordan. And that's a compliment that I don't generally throw around. That's how impressed I am with this young man. And the way he plays with an attitude, right? Like he doesn't look like he wants to be friends with the opposition. He comes from a different vibe. And again, I think that has to do that he wasn't highly recruited coming out of high school, went to Murray State, where all the other great players, there seems to be a brotherhood among them, right? Like Jason Tatum wants to be friends with Kevin Durant and Kyrie. And, that's the way the NBA is for the most part. Whereas this kid doesn't seem like he wants to be in the clique. He wants to beat those guys.
Yeah, the guy I've compared him to the most, and I think a lot of people do, is Derrick Rose. And he's got a lot of Derrick Rose in his game.
Yep.
Derrick Rose's third season, he won MVP of the league.
Yep.
Averaged 25 points, 7.7 assists, and 4 rebounds a game. He also played 81 of 82 games, which is remarkable. And Ja Morant's numbers are arguably better this year in his third season. I'm not saying he is the MVP of the league, though he's certainly up for the discussion, and he is not the front runner, but a front runner, deservedly so. But I see a lot of similarities. Rose, I think, was a little bit more stout at that point.
Definitely stronger. Yeah, definitely stronger. Yep.
Ja Morant, better shooter at this point in his career than Rose was. Just that, again, I've said this on the show, Sap. He's so electric and so explosive. And I've seen so many guys who are like that go down with those knee injuries, just because the amount of times you have to leap and then come down on it just exponentially increases the odds that you're going to come down on it bad. And I'm not saying he's guaranteed to get hurt, and I hope he never does, because it'll be really, really devastating, because he's one of the absolute bright spots of the league. But it is very difficult to maintain that type of game on a consistent basis and avoid a really serious injury.
Yeah, because his athleticism is at the same level as Westbrook, Rose, John Wall, Allen Iverson.
He's arguably the most athletic player in the league. He's one of the top 3 or 4 most athletic players in the league.
I've thought for the last 10 years, probably Westbrook was the best athlete. I mean, taking LeBron out of the equation, because he's just a different type of athlete because of his sheer size. But in terms of those 6'2", 6'3" guards, Westbrook was always right there. Wall, Derrick Rose. And Derrick Rose was, you hit it right on the head, Jet. Very stout, strong, probably 200 pounds. Like a mini version of LeBron, whereas Ja just is so explosive. It looks like he's playing on a trampoline. Like, what's his vertical? Because I see his head above the rim, and if he's 6'2", 6'3", that means he has a vertical of 48 inches, which is ridiculous. I mean, right now we've got the NFL scouting combine going in Indianapolis. I'd love to see Ja just show up there and just go through the drills. Like, what the hell he could probably be a first-round pick as a wide receiver or a quarterback or whatever the hell he wants. He's that level of athlete. But, he's so fun to watch. Again, he brings that edge to the court, which I like. I think growing up, his favorite player was Westbrook. I could kind of get that feeling, and I think he's kind of said that. Because Westbrook is a guy that a lot of the young players like because he plays with that edge. Sometimes it's not really the most focused.
Yeah, spectacular athlete.
Spectacular athlete who just plays his ass off. And, Ja's got that part of the game that we like. And again, this goes back to something we've always agreed on, Jet. You could be the biggest star in the NBA or one of the biggest stars in the NBA and play in a small market. I mean, Westbrook did it in Oklahoma City. Durant did it in Oklahoma City, and Ja's doing it now in Memphis. And if Zion ever gets on the court, he could do that in New Orleans. You don't have to play for the Lakers, the Celtics.
It's also a great city for him too, because I think they like basketball there. They've kind of bought into that grit and grind Grizzlies, and I think got a lot of fans there. They're a very young team and I think those players have all bonded amongst each other. And are all, they're an expansion franchise, so they're going to always be looked at as an underdog. And I think he really likes that. So it fits his personality well. Yeah,
he never got drafted by Memphis and said, well, I don't want to play there. Where we get the feeling that Zion got drafted by New Orleans and kind of checked out pretty quickly, which is a turnoff. And again, Zion is Duke. Ja is Murray State, different background. And that's just the way it works in the NBA. That's why a player like Ja Morant is someone that I think he could become the face of the league, because I've always felt, and I don't want to sound, anti-immigrant, because my grandparents came from Italy. But the face of the league generally is an American player. As much as I love Giannis and Luka and all the great players, generally the face of the league is from here, right? I mean, it was Dr. J to Bird to Magic to Michael to Shaq to Kobe to LeBron and Steph and all. I think that this guy has a chance. Ja Morant has a chance to be the face of the league. He's that good.
Yeah, absolutely. He's just got to, I don't think the production is going to be a problem. I think his game's going to continue to grow. I think the team's going to continue to play well. Hopefully they continue to add more players around him. Just got to stay healthy. That's all it's going to take. And I think it is hard at sometimes for a young player to, especially one with all his gifts, to go at anything less than 100 miles an hour. And he's going to have to learn how to pace himself a little bit, because there can be burnout and there can be injuries, and he needs to avoid those things.
Is a comparison a little bit Lamar Jackson in football, where you just pray that he doesn't get hurt? And again, this year,
except for Ja Morant has a more well-rounded game than Lamar Jackson does.
Right. Yeah. Lamar's still not a finished product as a passer. Right. And also, you look at a player like Trae Young, who's different than Ja Morant. Trae Young's not the athlete Ja Morant is. But Trae Young's developed that little mid-range teardrop game, which Tony Parker was really good at. I think Ja Morant's starting to develop that, which means he doesn't have to go all the way to the rim all of the time, right? I think Derrick Rose tried to develop that, because if you're attacking the rim strictly, you're going to get hurt at some point. You're just going to collide with the wrong guy, or you're going to land. I mean, I don't know how it doesn't happen even more often. It's almost like, I know I'll bring this back to the Celtics before we wrap up. Mm-hmm. Jason Tatum is so smooth, he never really gets hurt, right? But Jaylen Brown's not necessarily smooth, and he's constantly falling, hurting his wrist, his ankle. He's an explosive athlete. He's just not as smooth as Tatum. Tatum almost looks like he's not trying, which isn't fair because he is, but he's so damn smooth that he makes it look easy, whereas Brown looks like he's playing harder because he just doesn't have the basic skills that Tatum has. Tatum's the better player. So, it's almost like a little bit of a field there between those two players. And again, Morant, who's just so explosive, I'd like to see him get that little mid-range game going there, the little teardrop shots, which I think he is developing, and that will save wear and tear on that body going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's, that's all I hope for him, is he learns how to, pace himself a little bit, and I just hope he can avoid injury, because he's the most fun player in the league to watch right now. On a consistent basis. And I said this before too, when Steph gets going, there's nothing like it, but from a game to game basis, it's Ja Morant right now. And so the Grizzlies are a blast to watch, and the production is equaling a lot of wins in Memphis. But that's going to do it for us here at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. As always, we are presented by Full Press Coverage. Make sure you check out their website. Make sure you check out our social medias at JohnSap25, at Jet Stryer. You can find the podcast wherever podcasts are found, or the YouTube version at youtube.com/JetStryer. We'll be back on Friday with a new edition of the podcast, talking about what some changes the NBA could make as their new collective bargaining agreement comes up soon. That's kind of in our minds, because baseball is trying to figure out their way through their collective bargaining agreement to no avail. We'll talk a little bit about that too on Friday, so make sure you stay tuned for that, and we'll talk to you all later. See you, everybody.